The time is now 6 o'clock, and the Kingsport City Schools Board of Education regular business meeting is now called to order. It's June 11th, and we will begin with a very special guest. And Dr. True, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much.
Two very special guests.
Two very special guests, yes. Very excited to thank you all for being here tonight, by the way, and excited to welcome two special guests from Roosevelt Elementary. Well, one is going to be back at Roosevelt this year. One is moving on to middle school, I believe. Is that correct? So we're going to ask Belinda and Daisy Tenangueno to come up and join us for the pledge. They have just started their summer. And Belinda, you are moving on to middle school. Are you excited about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which school are you going to?
Severe.
And so how will you all spend your summer as you start thinking about moving on to middle school? Do you got big plans for the summer? No, just relaxing a little before. So, well, we want to thank you for being here and taking part in the pledge tonight. I want to ask everyone if you will go ahead and please stand. And the flag is right back here. And I will hold the microphone. Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great job. And we hope you have a wonderful summer. It will be time for school before we know it, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Just have a good time this summer. Thank you for being here. At this time, I'd like to ask for a motion to accept the agenda, which includes the consent agenda. Once the agenda is accepted, the board mutually agrees not to discuss any item of business or take any action that has not been accepted for the agenda. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as it presented?
Motion to accept.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
And if you would cast your vote. Just for our listening audience, we are still kind of working through some new technology, growing pains. So if you would bear with us, it's a great program, but it's just taken us a little while to get with it. Okay, all the votes have been cast. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. At this time, we're going to have some recognitions, and we'll begin with Mrs. Julie Byers.
I would like to call Miss Charlotte Ensminger up to be with me so you guys can all look at her and gaze at this cutie, because she's got to get used to people gazing at her since she's on her way to D.C. So you can be wherever you're comfortable. It's quite all right. Miss Charlotte just finished 8th grade at Ross and Robinson and will be a freshman at Dobbins-Bennett come this fall. She is the first ever winner of the Civics B competition. And I say that because Tennessee did it for the very first time this year. They were more or less a pilot program. There was a smaller one last year, but Tennessee did it this year as part of the chamber. So to tell about this process, because the more you learn about it, the more impressive it gets. So number one, she was first in the state, which means she's always going to be at the top. We're going to see a Kingsport City girl always at the top because you always start at the first for all that history. But she competed in this area. There were 5 school boards in Tennessee, area school boards that came together. Our area had 80 children participate. And of that 80, they went through 2 rounds of questions before they got selected to be first, second, and third. The top 3 from each of the 5 went to state. So there were 15 kids competing at state. Once they got to state, there were some more questions, but this is more than just knowing your stuff. You also have to present a project, and you have to use your civics knowledge and do something and figure out how that's going to tie in. So Miss Charlotte was serious about her project on homelessness and actually spent the time to interview our city manager, our mayor, and some of our other elected officials here in Kingsport to learn more about the problem. And apparently, from what I understand, she excelled at state, knew the answer to everything. So it's a really big deal, and now she has to wait until the fall, and she gets to go to Washington, D.C., and compete with, I think there's only 38 other states competing right now, but that's still a pretty big number, and she will be vying for $10,000. So she won $500 for the state, and now she's trying for $10,000. So Charlotte, I would like to present you with a certificate and all of our good luck as you come and represent Kingsport and your very own intelligence. Thank you very much.
Maybe you put her on retainer. It's a console.
I know.
Charlotte, best of luck. We hope you have a great time in our nation's capital and also representing Kingsport in the state of Tennessee. Best of luck. Next, we have Mr. Todd Golden and Adams Elementary School.
Who's here from Adams representing? Come on up. I want to recognize you for your accomplishments. Adams was named, thank you. I don't know, wherever you want to stand, I guess. So Adams was recently named by Solutions Tree as the National Model Professional Learning Community, or PLC, at work school for sustained success in raising student achievement. The implementation of the PLC at work process was a major contributing factor in the improved achievement of these students. Adams Elementary School is one of approximately 600 schools and districts in the United States and Canada to receive this honor. Adams is one of only 12 schools in Tennessee to earn the status, and one of only 2 elementary schools in the entire state. PLC are schools and districts in which educators recognize the key to improved learning for students and ongoing job-embedded learning for the adults serving those students. PLCs often call upon educators to focus on learning, build a collaborative culture, and create a results orientation. Schools are recognized based on strict criteria, including demonstration of commitment to the above PLC concepts, implementation of these concepts for at least 3 years, and clear evidence of improved student learning over that period. Once results can be seen, the school must submit an application explaining its practices, structures, and culture for the consideration by the PLC Review Committee. Schools and districts selected for this recognition have shown a sustained commitment to helping all of their students achieve at high levels and have been willing to alter the structure and culture of the organization to reflect their commitment, which is no small feat in and of itself. We'd like to recognize Adams. Thank you.
Ashley and Dr. Harrell, thank you so much for your continued efforts. You're a bright light for many. All the support staff, the educators, everybody, just killing it. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. We will continue with our recognitions by Dr. Brandon Fletcher and the Rotary Club of Kingsport.
Come on up, Dr. Cook. You can't sit. Come on, At this time, the Kingsport Board of Education would like to recognize the Rotary Club of Kingsport for their book donation during National Children's Book Week. For over 100 years, the Rotary Club of Kingsport has served the Kingsport community by providing a free copy of a newly published children's book to all pre-K and elementary students in Kingsport City Schools. Dr. Heather Cook is the serving president of the Rotary Club of Kingsport. We're very thankful for her service and to the commitment that she has and the Rotary Club to the children in our community. So, thank you very much.
Dr. Cook, please pass along our thanks to the entire club.
I'm not supposed to speak, but I wanted to share that Belinda, that did, and her little sister Daisy, Belinda is a junior Rotary ambassador that we honored last fall, and she helped us deliver all the books to Rosemary.
Yeah, so what she was saying for our listening audience, Belinda is a Rotary ambassador at Roosevelt, so she helped distribute the books at Roosevelt. So, and there's one in every elementary school?
Yes.
An ambassador in every elementary school. Yes, wonderful. Well, thanks to the Rotary Club for 100 years plus now, have really been doing wonderful things for our community. We appreciate it. Okay, so if there's anyone here who was just here for the recognitions and you'd like to be dismissed, please feel free to do that. This is the time when members of the audience are invited to comment on agenda items. It is not the time to speak about personnel issues, as there are more appropriate ways in which these can be addressed. If you're not sure how to do this, please ask one of us after the meeting. In your remarks, you may not refer to students by name without permission from the parent or guardian. If you would like to speak on a topic not included on the agenda, you are asked to submit your request in writing to the superintendent of schools at least 3 business days prior to the scheduled date of the meeting. If you would like to speak about an item included on tonight's agenda, please raise your hand. I request that you state your name and limit your remarks to a maximum of 3 minutes. Okay, so seeing none, we will move on to our first business item, and that is the approval of policy on second reading. Dr. Andy True.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to come to you tonight with, again, a look at our policy for consideration. This is a second reading, which typically is done on consent. We went ahead and put this one on the regular agenda, just knowing the conversations we've had about this item and wanted to make sure that we gave it the full attention that you all wished it to have. And so we present to you on second reading policy 6.3071. This again is a board request late last year to develop and propose a policy that allows for the random drug testing of students participating in voluntary extracurricular activities in grades 9 through 12. That policy is based on TSBA model policy, is presented in your packet, unchanged from when we looked at it last month, except for we did change the title. Want to make sure that is aware of everyone because of conversations in taking alcohol, because that is not a piece of it. The title has been revised. It is no longer alcohol, student drug and alcohol testing. It's just student drug testing. So with that one minor revision, we bring that to you for second reading and consideration.
Okay, are there any questions for Dr. True?
Before we vote, do we need to talk about any of these changes you sent out about the procedures, the word changes, or
I'm happy to go over those. We have that as a separate agenda
Okay,
item.
okay. I wasn't sure we wanted to vote for it.
Absolutely. That's however you all want to handle the
The
agenda.
policy in and of itself, I guess, would be separate, and then we can review
But it's
anything.
contingent upon approval of the procedures, right?
The procedures cannot, we can't implement the procedures without a policy.
Okay.
Okay. That's what I understood. We had to have a policy before we could move on to the procedures.
And the policy's a lot more high level than what the actual procedure is, but I understand where you're coming from.
Okay. Any other discussion about the policy itself? Okay, well, then the recommended action, I'm asking for a motion to approve policy 6.3071, student drug testing on second and final reading. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Okay. Mr. Golden and Mr. Fletcher will second.
Second.
Okay. If you would cast your vote. Okay, all the votes have been cast. I don't see it up there. But all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So the motion passes. Okay, so Dr. True, we'll just move right on to item 5.2, which is the approval of the student drug testing procedures.
So thank you very much, everyone, for your thoughts and input as we talk through our procedures. This is certainly a body of work that has evolved over the last several months to get us where we are tonight. I did want to point out a couple of specific things and appreciate your tolerance for a change today as we were making kind of some final preparations and looking at the procedures themselves and having some conversations with city attorney. There were a few things I wanted to point out. I don't believe there's anything that, this is a subjective statement, that is a major change to what we've talked about before, but I did want to point out these were noted in blue, some wording revisions that Mr. Rowlett recommended just for clarity, and those were changes since this was originally sent out in the initial packet. So I thought if you are okay if we just kind of talk through those, and then I can let you know what changes occurred in this document, and then we can go back and have whatever conversation you all would like to have before we consider final approval. So on page 1, you'll see there in blue, again, wording changing from deter student use of illegal drugs, changing that to deter students from illegally using drugs. Again, a clarity that Mr. Rowlett recommended. The same type of revision there for on number 3, refuse to use illegal drugs to refuse to use to illegally use drugs. Same type of revision there on item number 4, just the wording and the consistency there.
It says, I'm sorry, who illegally use drugs. We have too many uses in there. To encourage students who illegally use drugs, we don't need 2 uses.
The first use would be deleted, so it would read, number 4.
Oh. Mine's not.
To encourage students who illegally use drugs to participate in counseling.
Is it marked out? No. It's not in red, it's not marked out. All right, sorry.
We'll make sure that in the final version that's the way it is.
Using colorblind.
Under definitions, again, at Mr. Rowlett, he recommended that we reference back to TCA, and so that way that would clarify that. The term drugs means any scheduled drug is specified in TCA 3917.45 through 3917.416. On page, yes, sir.
I appreciate that because illegal drugs, it's like a double negative, double positive or something. It's like saying you know how I've raised Cain about policies that say we're going to keep the law? You know, so I appreciate the fact that you did that.
Well, and two, I don't want to assume, but some of these drugs on here are not illegal with a prescription.
Correct.
So that's the point in the clarity.
Right. And when we list the long list of folks that have been instrumental in the development of this, giving thanks to Mr. Rowlett is key to that. He has been accessible and knowledgeable all along the way, and really appreciate his input on this to make sure we get these where we want them to be. On page 3, under the procedures of random testing, depending on when you looked at this today, there may be a change on this even since you last looked at it, because we had a late change this afternoon based on a recommendation from multiple board members on number 4. We state in there the number of students randomly selected for testing will be 20 per test administration, providing some clarity to that also would, in addition to that 20, per the guidelines as they're presented, include those that had tested positive in previous administration. So we've changed that wording to read, the number of students randomly selected for testing will be 20 per test administration, plus those required to test per the requirements of the program. So that way it would understand it could be potentially more than that. Some clarity on number 6, you're going to see this a couple of different places. Initially, we had administrator capital A. That, again, would designate by definition, normally in code and policy, a capital, a proper noun would identify a particular person. We've talked about that, the best way to handle that for consistency. So you're going to see a couple different places, lowercase a, administrator, as designated by the superintendent of schools or designate. So that way, that person would not necessarily be defined by position.
I don't get hung up on words too much. So instead of administer is a verb, right? Administrator is the person.
Correct.
Okay. I could see how that's a problem too, because it can infer administration, because we use the term administration so loosely and routinely in this culture.
I think providing clarity on that as designated by the superintendent of schools or designee is what we wanted to address that. You're going to see that again in 7, and then also you're going to see in 7 a repeat of what you saw up in 4 when it comes to those that are in the testing that are going to be tested that were not randomly selected but were required to test based on previous positives. So basically, the administration of this is when you're getting them to pull in to test, it's going to be notification to the students who have been selected for testing and those required to test per the requirements of the program. So it's your random plus your other as well. On page 4, you're going to see a couple situations where sample has been revised to specimen. And then also in item number 3, the specimen is adulterated or the student has failed to follow the procedure outlined herein for the collection process. Again, referring folks back to the document as being the kind of the descriptor of what's occurring there. Again, recommendation from Mr. Rowlett. You're going to see on the top of page 5, again, that administrator revision. You're going to see that again under procedures in the event of a non-negative result, administrator to administrator, and failure to supply information requested by the company upon inquiry following a non-negative result. Again, making that just providing, originally it was stated the prescription or documentation, information being kind of more inclusive of what we would potentially see there. Cleaned up a little bit, the second bullet doesn't change the wording or changes the wording, it doesn't change the intent, is that the district, based on our conversations last time, would pay for the first appeal test in a student's career, but not anything beyond that. So those were the revisions based on your feedback and feedback from Mr. Rowlett late. He is here to be able to answer any additional questions that you may have involving procedures, or if I can help you with that as well.
Are there any questions for Dr. True? Okay.
My question is kind of indelicate, and I apologize for that. But I'm just curious as to the administrator obtains the urine specimen. Is there a closed door between the student and the administrator?
The administrator actually would be a school system employee, would not be involved in that process.
I understand,
That would
but
be
I'm
the-
talking about the logistical question of how do they obtain the urine specimen? Do they observe, or or they have privacy to come up with the urine
I
specimen?
think they have privacy. I think based on what I read in here, the company would allow privacy. You have to have a separate bathroom, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't see in there anywhere where they would be observing the collection of the specimen.
In our meeting 2 months ago when we had it
Yeah,
and
I remember
Belinda was
that.
here, they said it would be a closed bathroom.
That's what I thought.
But the toilet water has blue dye in it and the water.
That's right.
And the water is shut off. So there's no, I mean, and then of course, if the urine is ambient temperature or colder, they know it's been altered. If obviously there's dye, whatever. So
I
those-
forgot about the dye.
So, yeah, so
Yeah.
those were the couple things that, so they're not being, you know, I'm not going to watch you do
Yeah,
your
right.
business, because some people can't do their business if they're being watched. But there's privacy, and they've got measures in place to prevent somebody from doing something unless they do it.
The actual nature, source of my question was not the privacy on behalf of the student, it's on behalf of getting an accurate specimen.
Right.
And from having conversations with kids that have gone through these systems, there were, discussions about how it was breached and how it was breached routinely, and that was one way. So I was just curious. I know we talked about, I forgot about the dye though. Thank you for reminding me on that. That's a good.
Eidetic memories get me
Yeah.
into trouble sometimes.
Yeah.
But,
You and Sheldon.
and I'm just going to state, I'm still against it. You guys had a discussion the first time. I mean, we say we're not targeting athletes, but really they're the only ones who are going to be impacted by a 14-day suspension or 10-day suspension. I know that numbers have changed, and I've read so many, but I just feel that we could have a student that has never touched it, but that's in their home environment, and they could test positive. They still need counseling to understand what their parents are doing is wrong. But I know we've said it. I'm in a meeting this time. I just wanted to say it again because I'm still against that.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none, then the recommended action is to approve policy 6.3071, student drug testing. This would be on second and final reading. Is there a motion for approval? I'm sorry, I apologize. I got to move on down. My apologies. The recommended action is to approve the proposed student drug testing procedures as presented. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please cast your vote. Okay, all the votes have been cast. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? Okay, so the record will reflect the vote.
I'd like to also thank Mr. Rowlett and Dr. True, Mr. Nash, all the school level individuals, and the board, because this has been a 4-month conversation and process that that everyone has been invested in, and so just want to say thank you for everyone. This is confident that this is going to improve safety and health in our schools.
It's even bigger than that. I was cleaning out some purging files last week, and no, that's not how it hurt my arm. But I came across my old school board files from 2003, and I had notes in there about how we were discussing drug testing. That's how long it's not been a few months, it's been a long time. And so I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you all have gone at it like you have, and the fact that Dr. Fletcher has championed it successfully, because a lot of people have come before you and been unable to get it done. So you're going to affect multiple generations with your work, and I appreciate that and respect it.
Well,
Everybody's work.
well, I appreciate that, but like Dr. Hampton said, I mean, it's easy for somebody to come up with an idea if somebody else is going to do the work. You know, I mean, it's just, but it's, I really think this is a good step to ensuring, giving kids another opportunity or an opportunity to make a different decision. And I was just reading today a story. Of course, the young lady was out of New York, but it was the story from 2023 that this husband and wife, their only daughter, 19 years old, had just graduated high school, was on her way to college, wanted to be a doctor, and her friends, the testimony of her friends were that they'd never known her to use drugs before. Never used. One evening they were all together. They wanted to see what Percocet made them feel like. So she took a Percocet, what she thought was Percocet. 6 hours later, she was dead. And they tested those pills. 2 of them were seriously injured, but it was 100% fentanyl. They bought them online, marketed as Percocet. I've taken Percocet after surgery. You know, you just don't know. And for, you know, just for the kids to know that things just aren't what they seem anymore. You're not just dealing with, you know, hash or weed anymore. No. I mean, you're just not. And that one decision just to try something for the first time, just to see, it's roulette. It really is. So thank you I really appreciate all your work. And Jim Nash, I know you all put Mr. Rowlett, I know you all put a lot of work into it. Thank you. I think the community thanks you.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of research, a lot of asking other districts and really trying to get this as clear as we can, but still have some teeth to it. So we're very grateful, very, very grateful. Okay, we'll move on to item 5.3, which is the approval of the district-wide community eligibility provision. And that's Dr. True.
I'm going to ask Jennifer Walker to join, and
Mr. Fry
is also going to slide up. This has been something that we have been talking about internally in earnest, I would say, for probably the last 7 to 8 months, but really the research on it goes back even further than that with Ms. Walker and her team, as they have been thinking about the best way to really if we want to take advantage of an opportunity that exists that has changed on some level over the last year or so with some eligibility criteria, and being able to really look at how we can provide really that level of service to our kids when it comes to providing access to meals and understanding the importance of that. It's not just for the sake of providing meals. It's the benefit that comes from having students, you know, we go back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If their physical needs are not met, any of those other, working up toward that self-actualization can't happen. They can't learn, you know, physical performance when it comes to athletics, you know, behavioral, you know, in the classroom. All of those things really at its root if we don't meet those physical needs. So that's where this really has come from, and we wanted to kind of walk you through where we have been on this journey over the last several months to give you kind of an idea of, and I'll warn you, there's some math involved here that we're going to talk about. And there's some charts that hopefully will kind of spell this out as far as why we think the best thing moving forward is to go ahead and make the recommendation that we move to full CEP in all of our schools starting with this next school year. So that's kind of where we're going to go. I'll let Ms. Walker, and feel free obviously as always, jump in with questions along the way. I'm going to let Jennifer kind of lead us off to talk a little bit about what CEP is, and then once we talk through that, we can talk about kind of where we feel like we can go when it comes to our eligibility and why this is financially viable.
Okay, so CEP stands for, Thank you, Andy. And you know what, speaking of thank you, I just want to start by saying this has been a long process, and it's been over a year. We have looked at this since we started this in 2015. Every year, we have wanted to bring on everyone. But some things changed this year, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but I do want to say that these guys right here sitting next to me, Andy True and David Fry, have been invaluable in helping us determine the financial viability of this, and my invaluable office staff have worked tirelessly to come up with, we feel so confident in with what we bring to you tonight, and they've worked very hard. So that's Andrea Ball, Sharon Price, and Jessica Burrell in my office. So thank you very much.
I want to echo that. You're going to hear from the three of us on this tonight, but the real work is those ladies back there, and what they have done to research financial calculations, a lot of looking at product. We're going to talk about things. Can't speak enough about the team that is sitting back there on that front row, and the work that they do every day, but also through this process. So kudos to them for their work.
Okay, so what is it? It stands for Community Eligibility Provision, and it was part of the 2010 Healthy, Hungry, Free Act, and it really is focusing on food insecurity. And there is an eligibility to be able to do the program. You have to be part of the National School Lunch and School Breakfast Program, but what it does is it allows, if you're eligible as a school, you can offer no-cost breakfast and meals to every student in the building, regardless of anything financial. That is taken off the table. So currently, like I mentioned, we've been doing this since 2015, and we started with our title schools, and we have continued. We've been able to continue this program since 2015, and I'm going to say at that time, it saved our district with some of the changes that came around. And when we started this, suddenly David and I are looking at the budget going, wow, CEP schools, they rock. So, because they helped out other schools that needed a little help, because the participation was up, the stigma was gone, everyone was eating. And so what it includes a meal. You need to understand that a meal includes 5 components: protein, whole grains, fruit, vegetable, low-fat milk. And every meal, students have the option to have all of those, but they have to have at least 3, and one of them has to be a fruit or a vegetable. The meal is just that. It doesn't include for students to pick up a la carte or second meal items. And again, with this model, we've been financially viable since 2015 in our title schools.
And do we make sure, because I've heard different stories, that each child has a meal? Because I've heard some kids go through and they're missing something, so then they get charged. But do we make sure that, hey, you're missing a fruit, go back and get it?
We try that very much, and sometimes students don't want to. We can't force it. But we educate every year. We start the year. Our program's called Offer versus Serve, and that too is students do better when they have choice. But we do encourage a fruit or a vegetable, and if they don't want it, we encourage them to take it and put it on the share table, because 9 times out of 10, it will be repurposed and used either in the nurse's office, for a classroom snack later. We've even had some outreach agencies come in and clean out a refrigerator. The YMCA will use it. I mean, it doesn't go to waste.
That is something really also that you talk about the share table that came out of this board. If you remember, I can't remember who was on the board back then and who, when we started to implement that type of a share table for kids that maybe they wanted an extra milk or they were a little more hungry and they, but I don't want my milk today, or I brought water from home or whatever. You all kind of paving the way for that to occur. And that obviously is a benefit here, to where if we, when you're in the CEP and you, but to your point, take the milk, and if you don't want it, you can put it on the share table, and that way it's still used.
Okay, so
All right,
Andy?
I'm sorry.
Oh.
And I'm just thinking, if we're going to go all free, which I think is great. I mean, I think every child deserves to eat and eat it well. But if So let's say someone refuses their fruit, and now we have to charge them for that.
There's no charging of à la carte.
Okay.
So the only thing, like currently, if you charge, it is a meal. If you want something in addition, if you want a second meal, you'll have to pay for that with funds on your account.
Right. That's what I'm saying. But if they go through the line and they don't get their fruit and vegetable, so now they don't have a meal.
We'll encourage them. We have ways.
Okay, because that's the thing is, a lot of these kids don't have that money, and all of a sudden at the end of the year they have.
We treat
a
all
balance.
kids the same, and we think they should all have fruits and vegetables because it's healthy.
Right. All right, I'm getting. I just want to make sure.
So what the proposal we're bringing to you this evening, and again, we'll talk about the math here in a moment, is really, you can see there on the left, the 6 schools that currently have CEP. And so at those schools, nothing changes when it comes to eligibility. We will continue with that. What we're talking about this evening is adding the schools on the right to be able to allow them, and we'll talk about why we think that's financially viable here in a moment. But that's really kind of the breakdown of where we are to where we're proposing to add. Why we think this is a good time to do this, and we'll talk here in a minute about the eligibility, which Jennifer knows kind of better than any of us, is that it's based on a calculation that's done at a particular time of the year on April 1st. And we'll show you here in a minute why that works in this scenario. Once you become eligible, you remain eligible in a 4-year window. So we can become eligible for 4 years based on the calculation that took place on April 1st, 2024. Regardless of what happens after that. The calculation eligibility number, once you're in, you're in. And she'll tell you why this is a good time to do that and why we think this is the best opportunity to take advantage of this.
So how do we determine if we're eligible? Well, it's all about an ISP, which stands for Identified Student Percentage. And the ISP comes from the number of identified students which are directly certified. That means that they are eligible for a state benefit like SNAP, TANF, migrant, homeless. And then it's divided by the enrollment attendance as of April 1st. And with that, you see the number in bold there. Our ISP as of April 1st this year is 52.85%. Well, what that means is, as a district, we are eligible for CEP. And USDA is encouraging it if you're financially viable. But now, here's the big thing. This is why all the hoopla happened this year. It started at LAC, which is something Sharon and I attend, and we advocate for this program and how wonderful it is and everything it provides for students. But they want this program to be more utilized, especially after the pandemic, where we had the best 2-year experiment of feeding everyone at no cost. And so this has been in legislation, and they've been working on lowering that ISP. Well, it happened. We knew about it in March, and then come the fall this year, they lowered the 40% down to 25% and said, if you have any schools that are not currently using CEP, you can bring them on in January. Well, okay, well, Andrea and I, who does the numbers every year, she crunches because we're going to see if we're going to start a new 4-year cycle every year and see if we can bring anybody in. She immediately started the numbers. And then we came to these two guys, to Andy and to David and Andy, and we were like, hey, what do you think about bringing the rest of the district in January? And so we all talked about it. And the fact that we couldn't do anything with our current CEP schools, we realized that, well, we need to look at everything. And if we wait till April, we can do everybody at once and we get a better number. And we can also see what's going to happen with everyone else who jumps on in January, which now that I'm part of NETCO, I see everybody around us once a month and I get to ask questions. How's it going with the CEP? And it's going well. So
the quote on there, which I think is kind of what brings us to the math portion of the program here, is that clearing that 25% bar is one thing. That's one piece of it that provides the eligibility, but also the statement, when financially viable. And so part of the reason why we wanted to make sure, and why we all have been talking for months about this and running numbers, Andrew is tired of us going back saying, run them again, what about this, what about that, was that financially viable question, that we were doing our due diligence to ensure that this was going to be financially viable, which we'll talk about here in a moment.
Okay, so this is me. All right, so I'm going to talk, I've already said, we calculate our ISP every year. And I love the culture of a CEP school because we've been doing it since 2015, and it just evens the playing ground. And we know that I have so many stories I wish I could share with you with educators who come up to me and love this program and how it helps their students. But so, not to spend too much time, but I've already shared with you how the final rule dropped lowered the number to 25%. We have been looking at every financial aspect that we can so that we can continue to be self-funded if we choose to do this. As I've talked to Sullivan County and Unicoi County, who went 100% CEP in January, they're at pandemic numbers serving 25-30% higher participation. Some are not that high, but everyone who's doing it is saying it is working. We are gaining the revenues to do this, so which is very encouraging to hear that. And the numbers we're going to present to you tonight are all very conservative. We are only looking at what would our revenue be if we have a mild 10% bump in participation. And Andy's going to go through some charts. And before we get to that, we do want to show you, here is the average daily meals during the last year of the pandemic versus when we came out of the pandemic. You can see like a 1,600 meal drop from going to all meals at no cost back to National School Lunch Program. And then there's this change. And that was, you want to talk about that, Andy? Or it's just that we did a meal policy, we did a charge policy change. And we started allowing DB students to charge $15. And so with that, we now have more students who had access to meals, and we saw an increase in participation. We also decided we're not going to say anything at the register to any student pre-K through middle school. If you owe money, we will just send it to your parents and let them know that you owe money, and we are going to feed you regardless.
And we'll talk here in a minute about what the impact financially of that has been and how that plays into this whole conversation about the recommendation. So here's the math part of the program. And one of the things we really dug into is the revenue side of things and making sure that we were considering all of the ramifications to the reimbursement and the income. So I'm going to kind of walk you through this. I'm going to lean heavily on Jennifer knows this, and also David, because he's been involved in this as well, to answer questions and provide clarity on this. So the next 3 slides are going to be comparing our current scenario when it comes to our federal reimbursement, that money flows to us through the state, to where we are currently, then in addition to where we think we would be, and Jennifer mentioned, with a 10% increase in participation. And again, we saw during COVID 20 to 30% increase. That has been generally what districts around us have seen as they have shifted to full, is that 20 to 30% increase. We're coming to you with numbers based on a 10% increase. Again, wanting to play this conservatively, not overshoot when it comes to what we think our revenues are going to look like. So what we want to show you is where we think we're going to be, where we were with our reimbursement revenue, where a 10% increase would take us. What you're going to see is an increase in reimbursement revenue based on CEP schools have a higher reimbursement rate. You're going to see an increase in that number. It's going to be on the lower right-hand side as far as in yellow. First one's going to be lunch, second slide's going to be breakfast, third slide's going to be combining them all together. So what you see here, first column, current in SLP, that's going to be that again. We receive for lunches, based on our schools here, $2.456 million in reimbursement revenue based on the participation currently. If we were full CEP, that second column,
This comes from the federal government, right?
These are our numbers.
No, I meant, back
revenues.
up to the 50,000 foot. It's
federal reimbursement.
federal dollars, not city dollars, not state dollars, but
David
federal
can explain. It
tax
flows,
dollars
it flows through the
federally.
state, but it's federal dollars.
All of it.
All of this is.
So reimbursement, currently $2.456 million. That number, if we were full CEP, because the CEP reimbursement rate is higher, would have been $2.834 million for an increase in $378,000 if we were full CEP. If you take those same levels of participation and add a 10%, again, trying to play this conservatively, add a 10% participation increase, we would have seen reimbursements of $3,007,982. Again, that's an additional $173,000. So for lunches alone, if we had been full CEP, we would have seen an increase of $551,928 in reimbursements. That's for lunch. Now, there's going to be another side to this here I'm going to throw you in a minute. Just beware. Because we're now full CEP under that $551,000, we're not selling lunches. So there's a cash revenue we don't have included in here, which we'll show you here in a minute how that impacts it. So it's not suddenly just a windfall of $551,000. We're losing money on the other side of the equation, but we'll show you how the math works. So yes, so $551,000 for lunches would have been an increased reimbursement, $40,386 in breakfast. Again, we think that's conservative because one of the other things that we have, which Jennifer will talk about later, is second chance breakfast, which is a game changer at the high school, especially with full CEP if we go that route, which we did during, she can talk about that in a moment. That's on a future slide. So you're going to see here on this third slide, as far as our financial viability when it comes to our revenue, we would estimate, based on this year's participation, with a 10% increase, that we would see reimbursements increase by $592,314. That's with a 10% increase. Now, again, we think that's conservative based on our 20 to 30% bump that we saw in COVID and in other districts.
So help me understand. So a 10% increase yields an 18.23% increase in revenue, right? Is that what you're saying?
In
Why?
reimbursed.
Because the reimbursement for the CEP module
Yeah.
is better for us, for our district, based on our ISP. That's why you have to do the numbers. You have to see, are you financially viable? So it's complicated math, and I would be glad to sit down and do it with anybody, but for this presentation, we put it in a chart. And Andrea and David
That's been the last 6 months.
yeah.
It's confirmed.
Jennifer, Ms. Walker, is it fair to say that the higher the ISP, the greater the rate of return?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, so by being 52% as opposed to the minimum 25%, yields a greater return for us.
Exactly.
So you'll note there also, again, the care that has been taken. You got 0% increases in our current CEP schools. So we're not anticipating an increase in those schools. We're just taking a 10% increase in participation in what we're recommending when we go to full CEP. So we have now added to the revenue side by $592,000 based on the CEP reimbursement rate. Now we're going to take some of that back because we have not cash sold any meals. So we estimate approximately, and David, this is from a budgetary standpoint, can confirm this, approximately $525,000 in cash purchases just for meals. We're not talking about second meals or a la carte. Again, trying to look at this conservatively, we have not taken that revenue into this model at all. If somebody comes by and pays for a second meal, or they buy a la carte items, ice cream, cookies, whatever. So we would anticipate, we've now taken out what David has budgeted in the budget for next year, $525,000 in cash. We're also taking into account that if we see a 10% participation increase, that's going to mean additional food cost. So we've added in $125,000 of additional food cost here to account for that 10%, again, thinking conservatively. So that gives you what we would anticipate a $650,000 decrease when you add that 525 and the 125, offset by the $592,000 reimbursement revenue that we're seeing, puts us at a revenue shortfall of $57,686 estimated based on these numbers. We're not done yet though. So remember that $57,686. Because we are now full CEP, we are no longer having to offset two key financial numbers. One, for years as a district, we have not, there's different tiers, free lunch, reduced lunch. We have for years as a district bumped and supplemented the reduced lunch and made those kids free. So there's a cost to that every year. Generally, it's about $30,000, big picture numbers. There's also the fact that, again, with our change in charging, we have charges that we every year have to, David writes a check to supplement the loss that we have of outstanding lunch balances. This year, it's about $20,000, and that's pretty typical. So we are now at $57,000 minus 50, taking us to roughly $7,000, what we would estimate to the bad. We're still not done. So we're real close to break even with that roughly $5,000.
And again, that doesn't include any a la carte or the grab and go or whatever you were saying.
And a
Okay.
very minimal participation increase.
So second meal purchases, which there's not a ton, but there is some. Kids that want to go through, they get, if they would get a free CEP meal and they want a second meal. We do have kids that buy second meals. Or they want to buy a la carte items. We've not factored that in, trying to be conservative. One of the game changers of this, again, I'll put this back on you all as a board, was the approval for us to go into Netco. And so we know that there is some purchasing power there when it comes to using that cooperative. And so what we did is we were thinking all angles of this. We asked, this is work that I think Jessica and Sharon did a lot of as well. I think we ended up on 24 items. What are 24 common items that we purchase that we will now purchase through Netco? And we know Netco gives you same items or equal or higher quality. We're not downgrading with Netco quality. And run some numbers on that. What did you actually spend this year on items? What was the per unit cost on a spork or a corn dog nugget? And run that with what we paid this year versus what we would anticipate paying with Netco, or what we would have paid if we had Netco this full year. So they did that, and those are the next two slides. And again, for instance, I'll just start at the top as an example. We spent 35 cents a unit, a serving, for cereal this year. We served 115,210 units of cereal. So we spent $40,323.50 on cereal. If we had been on Netco, we would have only paid 27 cents a serving, thus saving 8 cents a serving times 115,000 servings. We would have saved $31,106 if we had purchased that same item through Netco this year. Did I say that right? No, I'm sorry. We would have spent $31,000 using Netco. So that's the $40,323 minus the $31,106. We would have saved $9,216 on cereal this year if we had used Netco. So using that model for all of these items, cereal, orange juice, apple juice, who would have ever guessed that we spent $48,000 on corn dog nuggets? But we did. We would have only spent $22,108 on corn dog nuggets. If we had been in Netco this year, we would have saved on that item alone $26,530.
We would have saved $33,000 on sports. They're a penny. Penny with Netco, we pay 5 cents.
So that's on page 2. That's the one of the biggest ahas for us. We would have saved $33,000 in sports. So on these 24 items, again, pre-Netco versus what we would have saved and would save moving forward on Netco, we would have realized a savings of $171,000 this past year.
And our order guide is over 400 items. This is just 24.
So again, is it financially viable? We look at the whole picture of what are we taking in, what are we spending. This is a model we look at and go, from a financial viability standpoint, we feel comfortable making this recommendation and not wanting to jump into it with the thought we may have to fall back out, but being able to utilize that 4-year window that we're comfortable with the math here. And that really is what has taken so much of the time over the last several months. So there are some implications to moving into full CEP on those other schools, which Jennifer will kind of talk about.
And we could do better at breakfast. And when it's no cost, suddenly we can have bags that they can take to their classroom. We had a great run with Second Chance Breakfast, doubled breakfast at the high school when we did Second Chance Breakfast. And with them not even having to pay at the register and be able to take one, it'll be a hit. So we know we can improve breakfast. We know there's going to be increased food and material costs, but we just showed you, look at the savings by being part of Netco. Because with increased participation, we're going to use more. We're going to have to buy more, but hey, I think we've got a good option to save money. There's also going to be increased labor. And David and I looked at that and we balanced the budget with a model with more labor to accommodate for CEP if we get to do this. So we feel comfortable with that. We did a lot of things this year to experiment with bumping up participation, like we did Solar Eclipse Day, and we had moon pies and rocket dogs, and we just know there's a lot of fun things that we can do and generate more participation. And that's the kind, we want to spend time on the quality of our food and not chase down applications. That is a huge burden on a school nutrition office, on a counseling office, on teachers when their children are not being fed, and we have to figure out how do we provide that? And we're having to find eligibility, and it's a struggle. And so you take that off the table with this program, and that's glorious. Just we already mentioned, we haven't even given you any a la carte and second meal revenue numbers, which exist. I mean, I've seen kids buy 3 Smart Mouth pizzas through the Dobbins Bennett High School line. If they want something second and they have that in their account, or some of them pay cash, they will buy it, and that only helps us. And I know, like Julie we have staff training to do. We do that every year. And we know my staff is so excited about the possibility of being able to offer this to students. And they are going to embrace this and run with it and make it work. And I hope you've enjoyed the pictures through the presentation. These are all photos from our cafeterias, our serving lines, everything.
That is not what school lunch looked like when I was in school, I'm telling you.
I'm very proud of our team. We try hard and we are successful.
It is and not a piece of this, but just to echo that, I have the privilege of sitting in on managers' meetings when I can and in those months. The passion that they bring to the table, wanting to have excellence, and how that's reflected in all of the school nutrition staff. One of the best parts of the back to school week is when they all meet together, being able to kind of be around that group. And then we try to bounce into schools and eat food and check in on people and see how school operations are working. There's a level of pride. I think district-wide, that's kind of indicative of who we are, but the level of pride that they bring to the work. Because my opinion is it's because they're seeing the results in the moment every day when the 9-year-old comes through and they can provide them with a meal and they can provide them with something healthy and good to eat. They see that probably more than any of us do because they see it at the register and they see it in the cafeterias. And the work that they do, I want to brag on them because they do a great job. So the big close here is, we feel this is kind of the way to go just because it provides every child access to a healthy meal. We've talked about what that can do in the classroom with behavior, what it can do just to providing the foundation for students to be successful. It does eliminate all our student meal debt, so we would likely have to come back to you potentially with a policy change, because now remember, we changed our policy to allow for student meal debt, which this would kind of take that off the table, and that would not be something, again, staff chases that down, administrators chase that down over the course of the year, and we just feel that given all of the parameters, we feel confident that we've done the due diligence to say that this is financially viable moving forward.
So this would be effective when?
The start of school
First
year,
school year.
24, 25.
And the cycle is approved for how long? 4 years? So my question pertains to, what if politically administrations turn over and enter a much different sort of culture, and suddenly instead of 25%, it's 75%? Or am I getting that right? With the difficulty to be eligible triples. Mm-hmm. You follow me? It always scares me to give something with the thoughts that I might have to take it back. Right. So you feel comfortable that that's...
You know, it's...
You understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, and this is real. I mean, I'm telling you, the pandemic was a game changer, and there are already 8 states that have adopted statewide. See, they use this program, this federal program, and the state joins along, and they have put it into policy that the state is all kids at all schools, public schools, have access to breakfast and lunch at no cost. I mean, it is hot. And like I said, I've been in Washington for 2 years for LAC. I know this is a bipartisan. This is not one party or the other. This reaches everyone.
Well, nobody, who's going to sit and argue against feeding a hungry child?
Exactly.
I mean, come on.
Exactly.
But I also feel it's not my responsibility right now, but somebody feels those are tax dollars that are being, that's the reason I asked the question. They're coming from somebody's pocket to pay for this. Do we feel like there was legitimately children going unfed because
yes,
because they wouldn't enroll in the program they were eligible for, or because they were just out of the eligibility range?
You know, we had someone that missed reduced by $15 this year. I mean, and we actually looked at that too in our numbers, and we found how many families that were just barely missed it. How many, guys? It was 90. I mean, that were just so close, but they didn't get to have this opportunity.
I think I think of 2 things when you ask that question. One, what are the families that are just barely outside of the eligibility? We quote Mr. Nash often around here, there has to be a line. We get that. Yep. There has to be a mark there, but those that just barely miss it. But also, where are those families that don't fill out or don't turn in paperwork because of the stigma of that and what they feel that says about.
Or they're just unwilling.
Correct.
They just don't complete the form. They just don't complete it.
I think it's more of that than,
yeah.
I think the stigma has really rapidly disappeared the last 20 years in our culture.
And again, for us, this comes down to, I think, the philosophical view. When a 9-year-old is at the register, what can we do to provide them something that is going to prepare them in the best way to go back and be successful in the classroom, in the school? And so that's kind of
teachers.
Yeah.
I'll say this and I'll hush. Dr. Hampton and I were talking about goals and such the other day, and I've always read that everybody's got a book in them. If I was going to write a business book, I'd call it emotional engagement, and it would be that if you can hire people that are emotionally engaged and the return on what they're doing every day, that's the person you want. I love how you all always you're emotionally engaged in all this, and you're such an advocate for it. And, we have to kind of think, like I said, who's going to argue against feeding a child? But you have to sort of back out of it a little bit and make sure you're doing the right thing for the long haul. A manager gets paid to predict what's going to happen the next year, whereas somebody in governance is supposed to predict what's going to happen in 10 years. So that's the reason the nature of my questions about how long, is there any fear that we'll ever have to retract it?
I think we share that concern reflected in the amount of due diligence when it came to the financially viable question, how much we looked at that, knowing that it does open you up for that 4-year window. Now, you can, if a district would choose to, they can pull out at any point in that 4 years. We wanted to go through the financial work to the point where we felt confident enough to make a recommendation to avoid potentially having to do that. We share your concern with not wanting to pull the rug out. Our cafeteria managers and staff felt that when we went from full during COVID to pulling back out. I mean, they live that every day about why is this not free anymore? And we wanted to do what we could based on the information we had to do our due diligence with that spirit in mind.
The cycle is for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to complete that cycle before you apply again, or is it you renew can you renew every year for 4 years?
If your numbers are better the next year, you recertify and have another 4 years.
Okay.
So you have that option. That's why we look at it every year, because we're going to get our best numbers always.
So it's not like we're in this for 4 years and then 3 years from now you're doing all this work again. You're constantly, annually running these numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, if the numbers are better, then.
Mm-hmm.
There's another implication. So we're in year 9, I believe. Mm-hmm. So for the last several years, we have students who are arriving at the high school having never paid for a meal in school. Mm-hmm. So behaviorally, getting a parent who's never completed an application or getting a child who's never had to go through that process, I think we saw a significant drop-off coming from the 3 elementary to 1 middle to the high school who have never behaviorally had to go through that process, and the amount of time that we would spend seeking the documentation. And then I can't imagine the packs of peanut butter crackers and cheese crackers and protein bars and granola bars that we just invest in at the high school in the food bank to make sure that children are eating who have chosen not to go through the process at the high school. Now, behaviorally, we wish they would. We try to counsel them into that. But after going through an entire elementary and middle school cycle, there's not a willingness to go to that place, unfortunately.
And I'll pile onto that. The meals they charge up until the point that application is approved, they're still accountable for. So it doesn't, you don't wipe the slate clean on that. Am I saying that right? Mm-hmm. So if you are able to chase them down and get the form turned in, if they've charged along the way, they're still on the hook for that.
And while
Retroactive.
Correct.
Not unless you're directly certified. If we sometimes we find them on the state list, and then we can go back that month. It's complicated.
And while I don't think this is necessarily, it should be a decision-making comment, I'll make it, that many or most of the districts around us have moved to this. Is that a correct statement? And so I can't imagine the idea that we as a school system would knowingly put ourselves in a position where kids are receiving this benefit in other districts, almost every district around us, and we would, for whatever reason, would decide not to do that here. I feel like we're letting our parents down most importantly, our children, if we're going to make that type of statement. And our decision will support that statement or not.
I appreciate that. And, I just want to add one other comment. It's like, in the education system, before a student gets on a bus or a football player wears a helmet or we give a student a laptop, we don't ask them for financial information to make them deserve that. But for some reason, we do that with food, a basic human need. You have to deserve to get food at no cost with financial information from your family. But there's a lot of other things that are needed in education, but that's not how we approach it. It's just part of education because you need it. You need food. Kids need food to learn. Again, that's just.
I think there's just a bit of a philosophical difference there. It's the parent's responsibility to feed their child. That I think may be why they, and I thank you, first of all, thank you for everyone for all of this. This is exhaustive work, holy cow. I'm sitting here looking over all these spreadsheets, and I love spreadsheets, but even this goes a little further than I would like to do. So thank you, because this is exactly the questions I would be asking. You made a comment about improving quality. What did you mean by that? What would you like to do to improve quality of foods?
I think what I meant to say was that our quality will not change.
Okay.
It is going to continue to be the quality that it is.
By participating in the NETCO, their products
Are
would
the
be
same.
at least the same quality or
And
better.
sometimes they have a name brand, and there's that they go directly to manufacturers and get pricing instead of having to go through a third party. And sometimes, that is Kellogg. I mean, it is name brand and a very great price where I'm having to go through just the grocery vendor. And so that's why you see a bigger difference in some of this cost.
What's that acronym for?
Oh, goodness.
Anybody knows?
I'm too new to Northeast Tennessee Cooperative Organization.
I wasn't sure it was limited to Northeast Tennessee. That's the reason I assumed that probably was the case.
And I hope you don't take any of my questions or comments as though I appreciate the passion of taking care of children, because as parents, we entrust the system to care for those. We hire the system through our tax dollars to educate them. And there is a bit of a philosophical difference in my mind, which also brings me to the question of how do kids that pack their own meals affect this system?
Okay, great question. And, a lot of times they could come and have milk, fruit, and vegetable and add to their lunch. And we did that in the pandemic. We started telling kids, hey, come on, if you want this, you just get 3 items. And a lot of parents, if you I look at the lunch boxes, and I think, I just don't understand it. I think, for a healthy meal for the cost, it just outdoes so many lunch boxes that I see.
They
and they
need-
can
they
use
need
some
some
fruits or
supplementation.
vegetables, some milk. And we even put signs up during that, hey, add to your lunch.
It doesn't have to be an either or.
Okay,
Yeah.
but my question still stands, if a kid packs and doesn't want to supplement, does it affect the program, meaning there's not a capturable reimbursement unit?
No, they would have to come through.
Right,
There's not-
that's what I'm
yeah.
saying. So it would negatively, if a kid packs, it would ostensibly, I'm using the word, misappropriating the word negative, but I'm saying it negatively impacts the reimbursement, meaning it would be a lost potential for reimbursement, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Do we know how many pack at this point?
Well,
Just an estimate?
if you look at participation numbers, so
Excuse me, I promise I'm not trying to be negative.
No.
We had meals just delivered to our house. We didn't ask for them. They kept delivering them to us. So I know they got counted in there during the pandemic. And we even asked to stop delivering, and they kept delivering it to us. So I know we over-delivered meals to people during that time. So that number, I believe, is a little inflated.
well, and that is not, we were not out on buses during the 21-22 year. That is in the school.
Okay.
The first year we were out on buses.
Yeah.
And
2021 was.
And do understand too that we were we had just as much of a problem to get. Just like if you went to the grocery store, was there anything on the shelves?
Sure.
I
understand.
And so
Yeah,
it was.
I'm trying to look at it from all sides. I completely agree with the kids that are right up on the edge like that. Yeah, let's take care of them. I'm talking about the other end of the spectrum, the ones that the parents have no problem paying for this. They gladly pay, their kids pack or whatever. And it's removing that to where there's an abdication of parental involvement of saying, hey, I actually want to be involved in my kids' nutritional choices, which is why I pack and why I send it. Those will not be captured. Or there's those parents who are on the fringe that go, oh man, that's just one more thing I don't have to pay for. That really rubs me the wrong way because I'm tired of parents abdicating their role to the school system. I want parents to take more responsibility. I want them to be more involved. I don't want them to be less involved. I don't want them to say it's our job to feed them. I want them to say it's their job to feed them. And I want them to feed them well. You have all the passion of what every parent should have, is feeding a child appropriately. I commend you for that and all of your staff, but please do not take my comments to be negative. It's not that at all. There's just a philosophical difference I have as it pertains to the abdication of a parent's role in the school system. So, and I know I can't affect that by doing something like this. Is not going to change all of that. I completely get it. It's just I'm voicing that opinion because if it's not heard, then those who are watching or hearing it at home may abdicate that, and maybe some of them will go, you know what, I should be more responsible. I should do these things and not put it back on. There's tons of stuff I wish the school system didn't have to do because parents would take the responsibility to do it for their own family. I wish they would do that on their own and stop leaving it up to the school system to have to be a parent. I think when you said improve, I think what you meant to say is you'd rather chase improving the meals or improving.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. That's what I was, if you could expound a little bit more on that, that's what I'd like to understand.
It's just there's a lot of paperwork that's involved with doing applications. Whereas if I'm not focusing on that, maybe I'm focusing on a farm to school grant to work with local farmers. We're working on recipes.
Okay.
And taste testing things with kids. I mean, there's so much we can do. And Sharon is a chef, y'all. She is bringing so much to the table with what we can do with our recipes
Sure.
and what we're serving to kids. And that's where we want to spend our time.
Love that, because I really don't like fried chicken. I just no, it's just, I hate giving it or serving it, or I'd rather have grilled, dude. I'm just like, that's just me, okay? And I know I'm in the minority as the, I'm not saying it doesn't taste
You're
good.
meddling.
I'm just saying, you know, I cringe if I give it to one of my kids, I'm like, I'd rather give you grilled. But that's what I would love, is to be able to, and that's what I mean by chasing the good recipes and delivering that. Because I think if you raise a kid right, my kids eat like little tiny tomatoes. I think that's the most disgusting thing to sit there and eat. They love them. And I'm like, I guess we raised them right. They love raw tomatoes. So raising a kid correctly, we can do it as a system, and I would love to see that. And I'm not saying that what we're doing is bad at all. I went and surveyed some of the meals. Everything I saw was stuff I would feed my own kids. It's wonderful. I'm not denigrating any of the quality. I would love to be able to chase that, is increasing the quality and the deliverance of good foods, wholesome foods, and less things that would cause some of the deleterious health effects to these kids. Because anyway, I think I've spoken my piece like Tim does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, are there any other questions or discussion items? I think you answered the questions I had, that we could withdraw at any time if we wanted to. We wouldn't have to reapply for 4 more years, but we could, if it benefited us, we could recertify, okay? There are several other local districts participating, so that was another one. And one thing that you said about removing the stigma, I think especially at a high school level, there are a lot of kids who would qualify, but they're just embarrassed to do that. And I get that. I totally get that. So I can see a lot of benefits from it. And
Thank you, Melissa. And it does. And I had a lot of educators share with me during the pandemic how that stigma was gone, and they just saw everyone participating. There's so many that need to but won't.
Okay. Well, if there's no other question or discussion, and by the way, thank you for what you do. My mother worked in middle school cafeteria for many years, and I think her claim to fame is she fed Jason Witten, and he would recognize her to this day. I'm confident that he would. So the recommended motion then is to improve the implementation of a district-wide community eligibility provision program beginning with the 24-25 school year. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. If you would cast your vote. And just for the record and for our listening audience, Ms. Byers has left, so she will not be voting on the rest of our items. Okay. Okay, all the votes have been cast. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you again for everything you do. We really appreciate it.
My wife's a dietitian, so I listened to this for 43 years. I got to hear this for the 43 years.
Thank you.
Okay, and then our last item is to approve a bid for nutrition program equipment for our school nutrition services.
Yes.
Mr. Fry.
Yeah. So we're still school nutrition, but they have some equipment needs to serve all those meals. There's a list of 29 different items ranging from tables to pass-through refrigerators to milk coolers, convection ovens, various items. We issued bids on May 15th and opened bids on May 30th. We were actually going to purchase this through a cooperative, but the federal purchasing regulations, because the federal money that's involved in this program required us to bid this. So we did. Got 2 bids from Trimark USA and Douglas Equipment. The low bid was from Trimark USA in a total cost of $256,780.75. This money is budgeted in the school nutrition budget, so we would recommend that you approve the bid from Trimark USA.
Any questions or discussion for Mr. Fry?
It looks like the Douglas folks lost the bid because they required themselves to get paid for the installation.
It looks that way.
They weren't willing to scratch that and let us do our own installation?
Evidently not. Okay, any other questions or discussion items for Mr. Fry? Okay, hearing none, then the recommended action is to approve the award of the bid for Kingsport City Schools Nutrition Program equipment to Trimark USA LLC, not to exceed the amount of $256,780.75. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Okay, all the votes have been cast. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fry.
No, seriously.
Yeah.
It's just 7:30.
It's like you came loaded to bear, man.
Yeah. So we will not be having a work session this month, so just FYI. Also, so our next business meeting will be July 9th at 6 o'clock. I think some of us are going to be attending the TSBA Summer Law Institute in July, and then we will have a work session in July on the 23rd at 6 o'clock. Another business meeting in August on the 13th. Any other items for
The
discussion?
next meeting is the 9th.
It is July 9th, yes. Yes. Okay. And if there are no other items, then this meeting's adjourned. Roll Tribe.